It was a quiet evening, the kind that felt almost too perfect. The forest around me was still, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. I had been walking for hours, not lost, but definitely not on a path I recognized. There was something off about the place. It felt like the forest was waiting for something.
Think you know how this story ends? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales.
I wasn't sure what drew me in, but I kept walking. Maybe it was the odd sense of calm, or maybe it was the feeling of being pulled towards something. I couldn't shake the thought that something was out of place. And then I saw it. A light. A faint glow in the distance. At first, it looked like it could be a campfire or a flash from a flashlight, but no, it was different. It wasn't just a flicker, it was constant, steady. The kind of light that shouldn't be there in the middle of the woods. I started walking towards it, slowly at first. It was hard to look away, almost like it was calling me. My heart was beating faster, but my feet moved without thinking. The closer I got, the brighter it seemed to grow. The air around me felt heavier, colder, and my thoughts became clouded. I couldn't understand what was happening. By the time I was only a few feet away from it, the light had become blinding. It wasn't like a normal light, either. It didn't come from anything. No bulb, no fire. It just glowed. I reached out, my hand trembling. Just before I touched it, the light flickered, like it was going to disappear, but then it came back stronger, almost like it was pulling me in. I hesitated for a moment, but something inside me kept moving forward. It felt like I had no choice. As I got closer, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The world around me went silent, unnaturally so. I could hear my own breathing, but nothing else. No birds, no insects, just an overwhelming stillness. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked away. But instead I stayed. The light was mesmerizing, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. It felt like the only thing in the world that mattered. And then I felt it. That chill creeping down my spine, like something was watching me. I turned around quickly, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing there. No sign of movement, no sound. The forest was as empty as it had been before, but it felt different. Like something was hiding in the shadows, just out of sight. I tried to shake the feeling. Maybe I was just scared of the dark, or maybe it was the silence that was getting to me. But then I saw something else. The light, it wasn't just a light anymore. It was shaping itself, almost like it was moving, like it had a purpose. I couldn't make sense of it. I knew I should leave, but my feet wouldn't listen. They just kept moving toward it, step after step. The forest around me seemed to grow darker, the trees leaning in closer. My breath became shallow, my pulse quickening. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into something I didn't understand. And then I felt it again. That sense of being followed. I wasn't alone. The sound of something behind me. I turned, heart racing, but once again nothing. The forest was still. But the feeling lingered. It was as if whatever was out there was just waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't explain it, but I had to leave. I turned around and tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same. The trees, the rocks, the path I thought I knew, it was all gone, swallowed up by the forest. I was lost. And the light, that damn light, was still there, flickering in the distance, like it was guiding me deeper. I began to run, not knowing if I was heading toward the edge of the woods or further into its grasp. My legs moved faster, my breath came in short bursts. I dared not look back, but I could feel it, the weight of something following me, getting closer with every step. I couldn't shake the sound of footsteps behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I ran harder, desperate to escape. But the further I went, the more lost I became. The trees seemed to close in around me, blocking any chance of finding my way out. I finally broke through the trees and stumbled into an open area, gasping for breath. I looked around, thinking I was free, that I had made it. But then I saw something that froze me in place. I wasn't alone. The light had followed me, or maybe something else had. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could feel it there, watching me from the shadows. The feeling, that cold, suffocating feeling, wouldn't leave. And now, every time I close my eyes, it's there. That light, that chill. Something is out there, waiting for me to return. And no matter what, I can't shake the feeling that it's still following me. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were stuck in place, as if the very ground beneath me had turned to stone. The light flickered once again, this time brighter than before. It wasn't just a light anymore. It was like it had a presence, a weight that pressed down on me. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I wanted to scream, to run, but something in me told me that no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't escape it. It wasn't just following me anymore. It was here with me, close enough to touch. I turned around slowly, expecting to see something. Anything. But the forest was still the same, dark, silent, empty. Except for the feeling. That feeling, like I wasn't alone. I took a step back, my heart racing, my mind spinning. I couldn't think clearly. All I knew was that I needed to get away. I needed to find a way out of this nightmare. But the forest kept shifting around me, the trees twisting, the shadows growing longer. It felt like the world was closing in. I took another step, and the ground beneath my feet shifted. It was soft now, like the earth was swallowing me. I stumbled, barely catching myself, but when I looked down, I saw something. A trail. A faint, glowing trail that seemed to lead deeper into the woods. It wasn't like the light I had seen earlier. This was something different, something more ominous. Without thinking, I followed it. My instincts were taking over, pushing me forward even though every part of me screamed to stop. But I kept moving, my feet carrying me deeper into the forest. The air was thick now, hard to breathe, and the trees around me seemed to loom larger. The shadows were closing in. And that's when I heard it. A whisper. It was barely audible at first, like the wind. But then it grew louder, clearer, until it was a voice. Low, slow, almost as if it were speaking directly into my ear. My body froze, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was enough to send a chill down my spine. I turned around, expecting to see someone, but again, there was nothing. Just darkness. Just the endless stretch of trees. I tried to shake the feeling of being watched, but it was useless. It was everywhere. The whispering, the feeling of eyes on me, the unsettling calm. It was like the forest itself was alive, aware of me, watching me. Then, the trail ahead of me began to change. The glow grew more intense, pulsating like a heartbeat. I couldn't stop myself from moving forward. It was as if the light was pulling me, pushing me to keep going. I stumbled along, half blinded by the light, my thoughts a mess, my heart thundering in my chest. But then I saw it. At the end of the trail, there was something. A figure, standing still, barely visible in the light. At first, I thought it was just another shadow, something my mind was imagining. But no, it was real. The figure didn't move. It didn't make a sound. But I could feel it. I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about the light. It wasn't just about the forest. There was something here with me, something that wasn't human, something I shouldn't have found. I took a step back, but it was too late. The figure was no longer still. It moved towards me, slowly at first, then faster. I tried to run, but the forest was against me. The trees seemed to shift and move, blocking my path, twisting and turning in unnatural ways. No matter how hard I tried, there was no way out. I felt it coming closer, That thing. That presence. It was right behind me now, its cold breath brushing against my skin. And then, everything went black. I woke up with a jolt, gasping for air as if I had been underwater for too long. My body was drenched in cold sweat. My heart was racing. I tried to make sense of the darkness surrounding me, but it was as if the night itself had swallowed me whole. For a moment, I didn't even know where I was. The air smelled damp, musty. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves outside. I slowly reached out, my hands brushing against the rough, unfamiliar surface. I was lying on the floor. For what? I tried to sit up, but my head spun. The dizziness was overwhelming, and my stomach twisted with the unmistakable feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong. The last thing I remembered was the light. The figure in the woods. I could still feel its presence lingering, even here, in the dark. I struggled to stand, my legs weak, trembling beneath me. The shadows around me felt alive, like they were moving in and out of sight, watching. I could hear the whispering again, but it wasn't the same as before. It was louder, more urgent, as if the voice was calling to me, begging me to listen. My mind raced. I needed to figure out what had happened. Was I still in the forest? Had I been taken? But that didn't make sense. The forest had been dense, tangled, and yet I had found myself here, in what looked like an old, abandoned cabin. There were no windows, just dark wooden walls that seemed to close in on me with every breath. I could barely make out the outline of the room. It was small, cramped, and smelled of rot. The voice spoke again. This time, it was clearer, more distinct. "Don't look back," it whispered, barely above a breath. "It will find you." I froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My body was frozen, paralyzed by fear. I didn't know what the voice meant. What was going to find me? I tried to make sense of the warning, but my mind couldn't focus. I stumbled across the room, my hands outstretched, searching for anything that could give me a clue about where I was. And then I found it. A door. A heavy wooden door, locked from the inside. I tried the handle, but it didn't budge. Panic gripped me again. I needed to get out. I needed to leave before whatever was lurking outside found me. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed something strange. There was a small crack in the door, just enough for a sliver of light to sneak through. Not a normal light, though. It was the same light. The same strange glow I had seen in the forest. I took a step back, heart pounding. It couldn't be. How was this possible? The light from the forest had somehow followed me here. I didn't know how, but it had. The same glow that had haunted me for what felt like forever was now seeping into this room, spreading like ink in water, staining everything it touched. The whispering began again, this time more frantic. "It's coming. It's already here." I backed away from the door, feeling my breath catch in my throat. Something was waiting for me outside. Something I couldn't see but could feel, pressing against the door, waiting to get in. The air grew thicker, suffocating. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in, the shadows wrapping around me. I turned in circles, trying to find a way out, but the room felt like it was closing in on me. Every direction was the same, dark, endless, and full of whispers. The silence between the whispers grew louder, more oppressive. And then I heard it, a faint scratching noise coming from the corner of the room, like claws on wood. Slowly, almost methodically, it grew louder, and then the sound stopped. But the tension in the room remained, thick and heavy. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest, it drowned out everything else. I ran towards the door again, throwing myself against it, trying to force it open. It was hopeless. The door wouldn't budge. I fell to the floor in desperation, my hands trembling. I had to get out. But where? The whispers filled my ears again, this time almost mocking me. "You can't escape," they said. "It will always find you." I looked around the room, hoping for something, anything that could help me escape. And that's when I saw it. A small crack in the wall, just big enough for me to crawl through. With renewed hope, I rushed toward it. My hands scraped against the rough surface as I forced myself through the crack. It wasn't easy, but it was my only chance. My body was scraped and bruised, but I didn't care. I had to get out. Finally, I made it through. On the other side was more darkness, but it felt different. Cooler, fresher. I didn't know where I was, but I knew one thing. I had to keep moving. I pushed myself to my feet, looking around. The ground beneath me was soft, like grass. I could hear the distant rustling of leaves. I had made it outside, but there was no sense of relief. The same eerie light was ahead of me, faint, but unmistakable. It was out there, calling me again, drawing me toward it. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had no choice but to follow it. Every step I took felt like I was being drawn deeper into something. A force. A presence. Something I couldn't understand, but something I couldn't avoid either. And so, with my heart in my throat, I followed the light once again. But this time, I felt something different. Something new. The forest felt wrong, almost alive in a way I couldn't explain. The trees didn't seem like trees. They were watching me. And that whispering, that haunting voice, it was growing louder. This wasn't just the forest. This wasn't just a light. This was something else, something older and far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I took a deep breath, my mind racing, and kept moving forward. But something told me that the worst was yet to come. The light was faint, barely more than a glow against the thick, heavy air of the forest. But it was still there, taunting me, pulling me forward, deeper into the darkness. Every step I took, it seemed like the light moved a little further away. But I couldn't stop. I had no choice. Something inside me, something primal, urged me on. The whispers were back again, louder now. Not in my ears, but in my head, like 1,000 voices all speaking at once, all demanding attention. The words were unclear, shifting with the wind, but one phrase stood out, cutting through the chaos. "You shouldn't be here." I paused for a moment, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The forest felt alive now, its trees twisting and bending unnaturally. They seemed to be closing in on me, their shadows flickering and shifting like something from a nightmare. I looked around, but all I could see was the endless darkness stretching in every direction. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself, trying to find some kind of reassurance in my own voice. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. I wasn't just in a forest anymore. This wasn't the world I knew. There was something else here, something waiting, watching me. The ground beneath me felt strange, too soft, too uneven, like it was shifting with every step I took. I looked down, half expecting to see the earth moving, swallowing my feet whole. But there was no time to think about it. I could still hear the light, calling to me, pulling me closer. Without thinking, I started to move again, pushing through the trees. I couldn't help it. The closer I got, the more intense the light became. It wasn't warm like I expected. It wasn't comforting. It was cold, sterile, like it was part of something that didn't belong. As I walked, my feet sinking into the soft ground, the whispers grew more intense, almost frantic. I couldn't tell where they were coming from, but they seemed to echo from every direction. "Don't look back," one voice said, barely audible over the others. I couldn't help myself. I turned. Nothing. Just trees. Thick, dark trees. They seemed to be closer now, looming over me like towering giants. Their branches were reaching out, their twisted forms casting long, twisted shadows. I could feel them watching me, their eyes invisible but ever present. I quickly turned back toward the light, feeling a chill run down my spine. Something wasn't right. The forest wasn't just watching me, it was feeding off my fear. I heard a sound then, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping behind me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I spun around, my eyes darting frantically through the darkness. But there was nothing. It was quiet again. Too quiet. I didn't dare move. "Don't let it find you," came the voice again, this time clearer, stronger, almost pleading. "You'll never escape." My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone here. Something, or someone, was hunting me. I could feel it closing in, the air growing heavier with every passing second. My breath quickened, and I turned again, searching for any sign of where the light had gone. But it wasn't there anymore. The forest had swallowed it whole. A sense of dread settled over me. The fear I had felt earlier was nothing compared to the suffocating weight that pressed down on me now. Something was wrong. The world around me didn't make sense. It was all shifting, blurring into something unrecognizable. I began to walk faster, almost running, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out. I needed to escape this place. But no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't going anywhere. I turned once more, and this time, I saw something. A figure. It was standing in the distance, just barely visible in the shadows. It was tall, unnaturally so, its limbs twisted and long, like a spider crawling through the trees. But there was something else. Something that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was glowing, just like the light I had followed, but this glow wasn't soft and distant. It was harsh, sharp, and unmistakable. The figure turned its head slowly, its eyes burning with an unnatural light, locking onto me. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the ground. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it move toward me. It wasn't just the light I had been chasing. This was something else. Something far worse. The whispers returned, louder now, their tone frantic. "You shouldn't have followed. It will never stop." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my racing thoughts. What was this? What had I stumbled into? I didn't know. I didn't understand. But I knew one thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to let me leave. The figure moved closer, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble. The air grew colder, a biting chill that pierced through my clothes, my skin, all the way to my bones. I was too terrified to even scream. I stood frozen in place, my eyes locked on the figure. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to obey. The figure was moving toward me, its glowing eyes now sharper, burning with a terrible intensity. Its body seemed to twist with every step, its limbs growing longer and more distorted. The air around me was thick with a heavy, unnatural energy. I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. It felt like the very air had choked me. The whispers in my mind grew louder, their voices now a deafening chorus. "You're not supposed to be here. It's too late." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as the figure drew closer, its shape becoming clearer in the dim light. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. The figure's skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes burned like two hot coals, reflecting an unnatural glow. And then, just when it was mere feet away from me, something incredible happened. The figure stopped. Its glowing eyes fixed on me, studying me like a predator examining its prey. I could feel its presence, its power, its hunger. But it didn't attack. Not yet. For a long moment, it stood still, as if waiting. I could hear my heart thudding in my chest, each beat loud enough to drown out everything else. The whispers faded for a second, leaving only the eerie silence. I couldn't tell what it wanted, but I knew one thing. It wasn't going to let me leave. Then, in a voice that wasn't a voice, but a sound that echoed in my mind, it spoke. You came here because you wanted to know. But now you see, there are things you shouldn't understand. The air around me grew colder, the temperature dropping so rapidly that I could see my breath. It was as if the very world itself was changing, warping around me, like the trees were bending closer, their shadows stretching longer and darker. You can't escape, the figure said again, its voice cold, sharp, like the sound of ice cracking. You're already a part of it. Now, you'll never leave. I wanted to run. I needed to run. But the ground beneath me seemed to shift. My feet felt heavy, sinking deeper with every step, like the earth itself was holding me in place. And that's when it hit me. The light. The figure. The whispers. It wasn't just a random encounter. It had been leading me here. The forest, the night, everything. It had been watching me, guiding me, pulling me closer to this moment. I wasn't just lost. I was trapped. The figure moved again, and as it did, the world around me seemed to collapse. The trees twisted into monstrous shapes, their branches reaching out like claws, the sky above darkening in an unnatural way. I felt the pressure building in the air, like something was about to explode. I could feel the presence of something ancient, something that had always been there, lurking just beyond the edges of reality. And now I was caught in its grip. You thought you could escape, the figure whispered, its voice growing fainter. But you never left. You never will. With one final step, the figure vanished, leaving only the suffocating darkness and the sound of my breath in the dead silence. The light, the one I had followed all this time, was gone. But the forest remained, and it was no longer the same. I stood there, frozen in place, the weight of it all settling over me. The whispers were gone, but the fear still clung to me. I had followed the light. I had followed it thinking it would lead me to something, to some kind of understanding. But now all I could feel was dread. A cold, suffocating dread that I couldn't shake. And as I turned, I knew. I wasn't alone anymore. Something was still watching.
Ready for more chills and mysteries? Subscribe and turn on the bell. You never know what story is coming next.